Lesson 8.4, Solving Trigonometric Equations. In the last section, we have found out how to find the sine of a specified angle. So if I have some angle in my triangle, then I would find the sine of that angle. I would type that in the calculator and get some number. Okay? If I need the angle measure, I just reverse that process, and we use what we call an inverse trig function. So the inverse sine of that number that we just found would give me the angle measure. Let's investigate how to use this on our calculator. So we've found that the sine of angle B is 0.4848. So if we go to our calculator, go to your trig button again, and this time we're going to select our sine inverse. We want to find the inverse, hold on, there we go. And all we need to do now is just enter that value, 0.4848, and then we're going to hit enter, and it's going to tell us that we're looking at a 28.9994 degree angle. So what we would get here, after having done sine inverse of 0.4848, it's going to give us our angle as 28.9994. And then to the nearest degree, this would be approximately a 29 degree angle. So let's look at the next one. If cosine A is 0.2894, what we would type into our calculator is the inverse cosine of 0.2894, and that should give us our value. Type this into your calculator and let's see if you can come up with the right answer. You should be getting this to be about a 73 degree angle. Okay, go try the next one. Tangent, same idea. We're going to do the inverse tangent of 1.2094. When you type that in your calculator, see what you come up with. You should be getting this to be about a 50 degree angle. I want you to go try these last two on your own. You will not get full credit for your notes if you do not have those two completed. Okay, so let's talk about how we use an equation to get us through these. So in this triangle right here, this is the angle theta that we're looking for. So we start the same way we did before, and across from my right angle, this is my hypotenuse. The side that's touching the angle is my adjacent side, and the other one is my opposite side. So we need to look at the sides that are involved. I have a number here on my hypotenuse and a number here on my opposite. So it's the O and the H that I want to use, so that's going to be SO or sine. So what I would set up is the sine of angle theta is opposite over hypotenuse, so it's going to be 12 over 24. So if I need to solve to find theta, theta is going to be the inverse sine of 12 over 24, which we can reduce to 1/2. Take your calculator and go type this in and see what angle measure you get. Hopefully you got a 30 degree angle. Now in this particular case, notice that what we have is our hypotenuse twice as long as our opposite side. That's our ratio for our 30, 60, 90 right triangle. Okay, let's look at the next example. Again, we're going to start with some labeling. Here's the angle I'm looking at. That's my hypotenuse. The side touching it is adjacent. The side across from it is opposite. Identify the sides that are involved, my adjacent side and my hypotenuse. So I have A and H. Using SOHCAHTOA, that's going to be my or cosine. So I'm going to do cosine of theta equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, so that's going to be 6 over 9, which means theta then would be my inverse cosine of 6 over 9, which I can reduce to 2/3. Type that in your calculator. This is not a special angle, so you're going to get this to be about 48.2 degrees. Go try the next one on your own. Stop the video and resume it when you've completed this. As with the previous problems, you need to get this one completed to get full credit for your notes. Okay, hopefully we got that one right. Now let's go look at number 9. This one's a little bit different because although I can identify my angle and I can do my labels, hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent, they've given me values for all 3 sides. So what I want you to do with this one is we're going to set up 3 different equations, one for each of our trig functions. So let's start with sine. Sine uses opposite and hypotenuse. So sine of theta should be 42 over 70. Okay? Cosine. Ca, that uses adjacent and hypotenuse. So cosine of theta should be adjacent, which is 56, over hypotenuse, which is 70. And our third one, that TOA, is tangent. So tangent theta should be opposite over adjacent. I want you to complete that one. So let's look at what happens when we solve these. Theta is going to be the inverse sine of 42 over 70. You can reduce that if you'd like. We're just going to use our calculator, so it doesn't matter. The calculator is fine with it that way. So I want you to go through and write this next step for each one of these. Theta in this case would be inverse cosine of your same fraction, of the fraction that you have here in green. Continue that through with your tangent. Write your expression for theta. Now pull up your calculator and calculate those 3 values that you found. Hopefully for theta, when you use sine, you found this to be 36.9 degrees. As you did the other 2, I'm hoping that you found something rather interesting. Because this is the same angle in the triangle each time, we should be getting the same value for each of those. That has to work, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. So it doesn't matter if you have different options, it doesn't matter which trig function you use, you should get the same answer either way. All right, let's move on to talking about how to know what to use. So the question is, how do I know when to use the regular or the inverse of the trig function? Well, the key is what you have and what you're looking for. So if you have a problem involving a right triangle, so keep in mind we're still dealing with right triangles only because that's what SOHCAHTOA applies to. If you are given an angle and a side, then what you're trying to find is an opposite. You're either trying to find a second side, or there's some other things that you could be asked for, but primarily you'd be asked to find that other side. In this case, you're going to use the normal trig function. If, on the other hand, you're given 2 sides, then what you're going to need to do is find that angle. If you're finding an angle, you're going to use an inverse trig function. Make sure that you think about these as you're going through. If you're using inverse, you're finding an angle. So let's kind of pull all of this together and kind of right off to the side of your chart. Let's go through what the steps are in any one of these problems. The best thing to do first is you're going to circle the angle that's involved, whether you know the angle or it's what you're trying to find, and let's label your sides. So you're going to label your hypotenuse, your adjacent side, and your opposite side. Your next step, once you've done all of your labeling, is to think about what you need. You're going to want to identify the trig function that you're going to use. And the way you're going to do this is think about what we did on that last one. Circle the sides that you have information on or the sides that you're missing. That'll tell you whether you're dealing with hypotenuse, opposite, or adjacent, and it will help you identify which trig function you need to use. If you have options like we did in the last one, know that you can use either one. Once you've identified it, you're going to set up the equation using SOHCAHTOA. You really need to be comfortable with SOHCAHTOA and know what that means and how to use that to set things up. After that, you are going to solve whatever equation you have. And remember at that point, if you are finding an angle, you will end up needing to use an inverse trig function. So let's see how this applies to a problem. At the bottom of the page, we've got two triangles. We're going to start with the first one. And our job is to find x. So I'm going to model that procedure. The first thing I'm going to do is find the angle that I'm standing on, because until I know where I'm standing, I don't know which side is opposite and which side is adjacent. When I do my labeling, I always start with hypotenuse, so I don't get that confused with my adjacent side. The other side touching the angle that I've circled will be my adjacent side, and then across from that is my opposite. So I've circled and I've labeled. Now I need to identify my trig function. Well, that's the side I'm looking for, so I need to use that. And this is the side that has a number, so I can use that one as well. So this is an O and an A, which leads me to believe I need to use tangent because that's the part of my little mnemonic. So my third step then is to set up my equation. So let's go ahead with that, and we're going to have tangent of my angle. In this case, it's given me a value for my angle. So tangent 25 should be opposite over adjacent. So we're going to put our opposite over our adjacent. And then the last step is to solve. I'm going to multiply my x across. And then I'm going to divide by tangent of 25. Sometimes you may be asked to leave things in trig form if we don't let you use a calculator. This would be an acceptable answer. If we ask for an approximation, general rule of thumb is keep 3 digits past your decimal, round to the nearest thousands, unless you're told otherwise. So in this case, x would be approximately equal to 15.012 units. Good? So let's try this last problem. We're going to do this kind of together. I want you to try each step. Stop the video, write what you think it is, then start the video and make sure you're correct. That's the best way to make sure that you understand this leading into your Tier 1 assignments. So first we're going to do our circling and our labeling. There's my angle. Here's my hypotenuse. Adjacent. Opposite. Once your labeling is correct, go identify the trig function you need. Stop the video and make sure that you know which one to use and see if you can get your setup. Okay, hopefully you identified that you need your adjacent and your hypotenuse, which means we're going to be using cosine. So our equation should be cosine of x, because I don't know my angle measure, is adjacent over hypotenuse. Go ahead, stop the video again, and I want you to solve this for x and type the value into your calculator. All right, hopefully you have that x would be the inverse cosine of 31/64. And so when you type that into your calculator, you get 61.028. Since we found an angle measure, always make sure that you put the degree measure here. All right, well, this is the end of our notes. Go get your Tier 1 completed and your knowledge check, and I'll see you in class next time.